You're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, where we discuss everything connected to the hit BBC series, Doctor Who. And today we're discussing the first Doctor story, The Celestial Toymaker. I'm Dom Bettinelli, and joining me today is Jimmy Akin. Hey, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
Folks, be sure to get your very own Secrets of Doctor Who t-shirt or phone case. I'm wearing some of our merch from our other shows that you can see on the video, or other types of merchandise by visiting our merchandise store at sqpn.com/merch. And stick around to the end of the show. We do have more of your great listener feedback, so we want to share that with you then. But for now, Jimmy, can you give us a recap of what happens in the Celestial Toymaker?
This week, the first Doctor, Stephen and Dodo, materialize in the domain of the Celestial Toymaker. He's a supremely powerful entity that the Doctor has met before, and he likes to torture people by playing games with them. If you lose the games, you have to stay in his realm and be his plaything forever. The Toymaker challenges the Doctor to play Towers of Hanoi, and he challenges Stephen and Dodo to a series of manipulative children's games to get the TARDIS back. Eventually, Stephen and Dodo win, and the TARDIS is returned to them. The Doctor, who has been invisible and intangible for most of this adventure, is also within one move of winning Towers of Hanoi, but he realizes that if he wins before the TARDIS dematerializes, the Toymaker's realm will collapse with them in it. So they take off in the TARDIS, and then the Doctor imitates the Toymaker's voice to complete the winning move of the game. The end.
Concise. What'd you think of this one, Jimmy?
Not much happens in it.
Exactly.
It's okay. I guess we should talk about the format that we saw this in. Now, this is one of the serials that the BBC has lost most of the episodes for. It's a 4-part serial. The 4th part does exist in video, so you can watch that. There have also been fan reconstructions based on telesnaps that have been made, and I've seen one of those previously. This time I watched, and I think you did too, a recent 3D CGI animation that was officially done. Oh, what did you do, Dom?
Oh, I missed that. I listened to the Audible.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's also available on Audible with Lincoln narration.
Yeah.
So what I saw was a color 3D animation of it. And yeah, it's on Amazon, so you can see it.
Okay.
But it's interesting. I haven't seen a previous. I've seen the 4th part with the actual video, and I've seen the telesnap reconstruction, and the animated version. I was surprised by. Initially, I didn't like the animation. I think they've animated other Doctor Who stories where the animation has looked better. And so I was initially hesitant about this one, but within a few minutes of starting to watch it, I said, no, this is good. Because what they did was they used the animated format and the super powerful nature of the Toymaker and the weirdness of his realm to create a much more psychedelic experience than the BBC could have on a children's program. Like, for example, whenever the Toymaker talks to, like, he's constantly changing size. In some scenes he'll be a normal sized human, but then he'll suddenly grow to enormous proportions. And whenever he's talking to Stephen and Dodo, he is huge. And so he's just towering over them and ordering them to do stuff in his games. And that they also could animate things that had to be played by humans in the original show. So like at one point you have 2 of the Toymaker's assistants as clowns, and you have 2 of the Toymaker's assistants, or more than 2, as playing cards, and you have others as dolls. And here they're not constrained by having to make the image fit a human. So they have, like with the 2 clowns, they look less human. And one of them is, even though it talks, is a rag doll. It's a giant clown rag doll. When they have the playing cards, they're these weird sort of origami figures that look like playing cards. And when they have the dolls and stuff, they're like wooden dolls. They look like wooden dolls. So they really exploit the nature of the story to create a more visually compelling narrative that helps compensate for the fact that the story here is pretty basic. And so I give a good review to the animated version. They helped improve the story with it.
That's good because, listening to it just in audio, I can imagine they did a pretty good job of describing what's going on. And Peter Purvis does the linking narration. And it doesn't have to be a lot of it as they go, but I get a sense of what's going on in the games that they're being played. But I can imagine having, I'm just quickly looking at the Amazon animation, the animation that's available on Amazon. It does, actually add to to it because this is a visual medium, and so having being able to visualize the characters and the events is useful there. But even just as a regular story, I mean, as you said, there's not a lot that happens. Like there's 4 episodes, they move at a pace, and there's basically 4 different obstacles that Dodo and Steven have to get through, and that's about it. And so it's a fairly straightforward. It's interesting to me, they don't spend a lot of time on the nature of the Toymaker.
No. They indicate the Doctor's met him before, so the Doctor's actually been to the Toymaker's realm before, but the Toymaker explains that last time he didn't even stay for a game. He just came here and turned around and left. And which was good for the Doctor to do because he knows how dangerous the Toymaker is. The Doctor says he's like a force for evil, and it's clear he's super powerful. So when Russell T Davies decided to bring him back for the as an opponent for the 14th and 15th Doctor, he decided to conceptualize him as a god who's a member of a pantheon of gods. And it's like, they don't use the word god, but you get the sense he's like, an Olympian level deity. Right.
Nearly omnipotent, nearly omniscient.
Well, I don't use nearly with either of those terms, but he is very powerful. And so they build him up as a threat. I can see why he was later conceptualized as a god. A couple things to note that are of historical interest about this series is it might have been William Hartnell's last because by this point Hartnell was having conflicts with the producers. They were also having a new producer come in. And Hartnell was having conflicts with the producers. He was getting crankier. His health was suffering. He was having trouble remembering his lines. And so, and he wanted to take some vacation, which was normal for the time. They had Doctor Who in production constantly throughout the year. And so the actors needed to take vacations while the show was still in production. And what they would do is they'd have someone typically get captured or something like that for a couple of episodes. And then they'd focus on the other characters while one or more of the actors got a break. Well, that happened here. And so the Doctor is prominently in the 1st and 4th episodes, but he's not really in. I mean, he's there, but he's not really there in the middle 2 episodes.
Visible and silenced.
Yeah, exactly. And so the way they handle it is the Doctor starts out this series as invisible, and coming off the heels of the Ark, where we went to the planet Refusis 2 that had invisible inhabitants, Dodo's initial thought is that, the Refusians are responsible for why the Doctor is invisible. And it turns out that's not the case. It's the Toymaker. And then the Doctor appears briefly before the Toymaker turns him invisible again. And then we only get to see his, and intangible, he can't touch anything. And he silences him, so we don't hear his voice. But he needs to play Towers of Hanoi, which here they call the Trilogic game. And so we have another actor's hand visible to move the pieces in the game. And he's wearing the Doctor's ring. So that's how you know it's supposed to be the Doctor's hand. But because William Hartnell had been so cantankerous and hard to work with by this point, one of the things they were thinking about doing is when the Doctor gets turned visible again, it's a new actor. And this could have been the surrogate for what would become regeneration. That, you know, when the Toymaker turns invisible again, it's just somebody else, and they have to deal with it. And is he really the Doctor or what? Which they do play out the first time regeneration happens. They don't yet call it regeneration. Patrick Troughton's second Doctor says, "I've been renewed." But they almost went the Toymaker route to replace the actor. And William Hartnell got a little bit more screen time. It's not a huge amount. We're near the end of the Hartnell run, but he did get some more. So that's the first thing of historical interest to note about this story. The second is the Toymaker himself. He's just referred to for the, there might be one exception or two, but in terms of how the Doctor refers to him, he just calls him the Toymaker. And yet the series is called the Celestial Toymaker. And apparently because they play Towers of Hanoi, which is a game, it involves stacking tiles of different sizes on top of each other, and you got to move them from one spot to another. You have a stack of progressively smaller tiles in one location of the playing board, and you got to move them to another location one piece at a time. And as you do that, you're not allowed to put a larger piece on top of a smaller piece. And so there's kind of an algorithm you use to play this game to get them from one place to another without violating that rule. But here they call it the Trilogic game. But since it's Towers of Hanoi, that inspired them to dress the Toymaker in a Mandarin Chinese costume. And also, even though it's in black and white, my memory is you can kind of tell they put Michael Gough, the actor who plays the Toymaker, in yellowface. And which was common for the time. And so he ends up getting called the Celestial Toymaker. The term celestial was a slang term for Chinese, where the Chinese Empire was called the Celestial Empire. And so some Doctor Who fans and others have said, "Oh, this is horribly racist." Except the Chinese themselves referred to their kingdom as the Celestial Empire. This was not an insulting term. It is a slang term. It's not the official one. It's not Chinese, but it's not an insult either. And so in any event, they've toned that down a little bit. He is in the animation. The Toymaker is still in a Mandarin costume. But he no longer has yellow face.
Right.
And there's barely any element of that. And even if he was the Chinese Toymaker, if they just called him the Chinese Toymaker, well, okay, who cares? Big deal. Right. I wouldn't care if he was the American Toymaker.
It's not really the important part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess some people are sensitive to having today people are sensitive to people, different races playing as other countries of origin or whatever, but and if you're in Los Angeles where you got 1 million people from every race to pick from as your talent pool, I understand, saying, well, let's cast a black person as a black person and a Chinese person as a Chinese person. I understand that, but if you're in Britain in the mid 1960s, and I mean, you might be able to find Indian actors to play Indian parts, but you're not going to find as many Chinese actors, and I don't got a problem with people playing, something other than what they are, because that's what acting is. I was going to say, it's called acting. The Doctor does, I noticed it does refer to the Toymaker as the Celestial Toymaker once in the beginning. Yeah.
And it's also here, Celestial connected with the stars, and this Toymaker is this outer space entity. So,
And later on, in the 13th Doctor's time, they have other Celestials, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So they kind of expanded to be these super powerful beings from outside our universe or whatever. So, why did the Toymaker make the Doctor invisible and intangible in the beginning? Was it just a lure? Was it just to get him out of the TARDIS?
Well, he says that he made the TARDIS monitor screen blank because he knew that would get the Doctor out, because the Doctor is too curious not to explore what's out there if he can't see it. So I don't think that was the answer. I don't know that they really give us an explanation for why he turns the Doctor invisible and intangible and silent, other than he's messing with him.
Right. And Hartnell needs to go on vacation.
And Hartnell, I mean, but in terms of the diegetic reason, I think it's just the Toymaker's messing with him.
Yeah.
And that kind of leads to a flaw in this, in my mind, which is I generally don't like stories of this nature where someone is torturing you with a game and it's supposed to be fun, but it's not, and they cheat, and they either they don't disclose the rules to you, or they break the rules that they do disclose, and it's like, this is just not fun storytelling to me. Here, I think it's done pretty well, but this general type of story of, oh, watch this super powerful being torture ordinary people, torture plots are not really fun for me.
It reminds me of two other things. Deep Space Nine's Move Along Home, where you're taken into another world and you have to discover the rules as you go. And the recent Netflix series Squid Games, which I've recently watched for the first time.
I have not seen that yet.
It's incredibly violent. It's interesting, and an interesting cultural phenomenon because it's Korean. So I don't want to get too much into that, but it's the idea of kids games with deadly consequences, which is what Squid Games is all about. And so this, of course, is much different from that. But there's this idea, like, I think I agree with you. Like,
and suddenly Dodo's head came off, and you're like, we don't have to deal with that.
Right. It's just, I don't love, you have to play a game according to rules that you don't know or are going to change arbitrarily, or both, because it feels like artificial drama. Like, it is. Yeah. Give the characters an obstacle to overcome, and let's see them overcome it, instead of, oh, you thought that was the obstacle. No, we're changing things on you. It's like, oh,
that's just lazy writing. It's better what Russell T Davies did, where in the final confrontation between the Toymaker and the two doctors, it's a game of catch. We know what the rules are for the game of catch, and the Toymaker loses. And we have this physical, can the two doctors keep from letting the thing they're throwing around, can they avoid dropping it?
Right.
And that's fine. That you can build drama with a game, but you undercut the drama if there's just malicious, rule changing and sudden disclosure of new rules and things like that.
Right. Which the Toymaker, he's very much about the rules of the game, and yet changes them arbitrarily in this. And or allows them to be changed or cheated. And there's no real consequences for the cheaters.
Yeah.
So let's talk about a bit about their opponents in the game. So Steven and Dodo's opponents.
Actually, let me mention Dodo first, because Dodo has very little screen time. She's not a companion for very long, and she gets a bad rap, and I don't think she deserves it. I think Dodo is a perfectly fine companion, and I think she shows that here in this story. She figures things out. She is assertive. She has agency. She is not stupid. I mean, I think her name, giving her the name Dodo, was a mistake on the writer's part, because it's led people to think of, oh yeah, Dodo, she was that dim-witted companion the Doctor had. Dodo is not dim-witted at all. Dodo is a smart young woman, and she figures things out that Steven doesn't, and Steven figures things out that Dodo doesn't, and they are an effective team together.
I think they make her in this one, so at that time, seem naive or
but they do
silly.
that with everybody, and they do that with Steven too, and they make Steven overly bombastic and stuff. But
I mean, there at times this one she's intent on playing fair with the other characters, or there were a few times in this one where I felt like, why do you have her doing that? That doesn't seem that doesn't seem like someone in this situation would do that. Like it just, she seems, they made her naive at times or bumbling. That seemed out of character for who we know her to be so far. I think in this one, some poor writing choices in this story may contribute to the overall opinion of her as not being smart. Because certainly in the Ark, she was fine. There was no problems with her in the Ark. I don't know how she's in the Gunfighters yet, but I think maybe in this one is the one where they created that reputation for her among some fans.
Maybe I'd have to think about that, but I see lots of good stuff with Dodo, and I just tend to chalk the, lapses up to, here's our lazy 60s children's television write-in, and it affects all the characters.
Right.
They all do stupid stuff.
Yeah, Steven does at times. You're right about him being overly bombastic at points and, almost ruining things by lashing out at whether it's Cyril or whoever. And there's some silliness that happens. There is part of Dodo's where she's smart is she realizes early on when Steven doesn't that there's something different about the dolls, the playing cards, the Sergeant Rudd and Mrs. What's her name? That
cook.
Yeah, they're not just creations of the Toymaker's mind. They're actually real people who the Toymaker have previously trapped and who presumably die at the end of this one.
Or at least get put back in the toy box until the Toymaker wants them again. Yeah.
That is a creepy part of this story, and I feel a lot of empathy for these poor people who are these victims of the Toymaker. But she catches that early on, which I credit to her. That was much smarter and more. I think her empathy is showing in that aspect.
Oh, by the way, another thing of historical note in connection with this story is so it went through a bunch of drafts. And at one point, it was the characters that Steve and Dodo meet, two of them were going to be named George and Margaret. And this was significant because there was a play back in 1937 that I guess was kind of like Waiting for Godot, where it's about characters waiting for Godot to show up and he never does. And that's what George and Margaret was like. There, you had this play about people waiting for these two characters named George and Margaret to show up. You hear all this discussion about George and Margaret, but they never show up in the play. Well, they were going to show up in this. And so so that was originally part of the plan for this. But then as it went through different drafts, they lost the rights to use George and Margaret as characters. So they had to change them around and so forth. There is also another character issue. The final game that Steve and Dodo have to play is with a boy named Cyril, who he's overweight, he's greedy, he's a schoolboy, he's in his school uniform. He's tricky, and if you know British culture of this period, it's immediately obvious who he is. He's a character named Billy Bunter, who was part of a series of children's books. And he's just like Billy Bunter in the children's books. He's overweight, he's greedy, he's sly, he's cheats, he's Billy Bunter. And there's a nod to that when he introduces himself to Steve and Dodo. He says, "Hello, my name is Cyril, known to my friends as Billy." Huh. And because he's so obviously Billy Bunter, that creates a rights problem. And so for the first time ever, and I think the only time ever in Doctor Who history, they had an interstitial announcement, those promotional announcements they have on the BBC. Coming up next on the BBC, the Doctor does this. Well, they put an announcement before episode 4 saying something to the effect of, in this episode, Stephen and Dodo encounter a character who is not Billy Bunter, but is inspired by him.
Oh, jeez. The actor, I didn't see it, but because I didn't realize it was a boy or supposed to be a boy, was 46 when this was made. So not really a child.
Not a child, yeah.
Right, but sort of dressed as one.
He's dressed as a schoolboy. He's playing a schoolboy, even though he's an adult.
Gotcha. Okay. You mentioned the whole Celestial controversy over, they're playing Yellowface. There was another controversy on the writing level on this one, where they play the eeny, meeny, miny, mo game, except
there is a word in some versions of that rhyme that it's in some versions. It's eeny, meeny, miny, mo, catch an N-word by the toe. If he hollers, let him go. And so nobody uses that anymore. And so here, they keep the rhyme, but in the audio version that you listen to, I read that they have Peter Purvis's Lincoln narration over the offensive word.
Talks over it. Yeah.
Yeah. Here in the animated version I saw, they mute that part. So you hear them start the rhyme, but you don't hear the offensive word. Right.
Which I'm fine with. Those things change. We're better for not using such things. So I'm fine with that. So the games are that Dodo and Steven have to play. Find the thimble, which is or just find the missing thing, which was the key in the kitchen. There's the dancing game where they have to basically dance across a dance floor that the involuntary dancing. They have to figure out how to get off the dance floor on the other side. That's one where I kind of wish I did see the animated or visual, because it was hard to visualize from the audio.
Yeah.
And then TARDIS Hopscotch, which was the last one.
Also Blind Man's Bluff, or Blind Man's Buff, as they sometimes call it in England.
Okay. Yeah. That was the first one that they had to cross. And then there was one with deadly chairs, where they had to, there's 7 chairs and they had to determine which one the 6 of them would kill you if you sat in it. And then
in different ways.
Yeah. Although Dodo sat in one of the ones and didn't die, but managed to survive. So
she got, because of Steven's help.
Yeah. Luckily she didn't sit in the one with the slicing knife or the electricity or the explosion or any of those. So she picked the right bad chair to sit in. So in the end, the Toymaker offers the Doctor power. Join me and I will give you the power to corrupt and destroy, serve me and live. And as I was hearing that, I was thinking, that sounds a lot like the temptation in the desert.
Yep.
Yeah. Christ being tempted by the devil in the desert to serve him. Do you think it's intentional? An illusion?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And in the 1960s, people's awareness of biblical quotations was much higher than it is now. I think that's intentional.
Okay. I thought it was an interesting approach. I don't know that the Doctor, just like, Jesus would never take the devil's offer. I can't imagine the Doctor ever accepting that. It's not even on the table. It's not even, I don't think he was even tempted by it. He just wanted to get away. In the end, he uses Alexa to play the last move to win the game, which is because it's an interesting mechanic. So every once in a while, we would see the Doctor doing the Towers of Hanoi game, the Trilogic puzzle, and the Toymaker. So the obvious solution is the Doctor has to. If the Doctor finishes the puzzle before Steven and Dodo finish their games, they all have to stay as the Toymaker's servants and slaves. So the obvious solution for the Doctor would be play slow. But the Toymaker says, no, if you play slow, I'm going to skip turns and make you jump ahead, which he does several times.
Right. And so even though the Doctor may be at move 360, the Toymaker will suddenly say, advance to move 400. And we see the pieces start moving by themselves. And now the Doctor is further along the solution and has lost time because he was trying to delay. At least that's the idea.
And so the Toymaker's trap in the end is, if as soon as you complete the puzzle, he's got one more move left on his puzzle after Steven and Dodo, have finished their, getting back to the TARDIS. But if as soon as he finishes, the Toymaker's world that they've been dragged into will explode and they will die, or whoever's outside the TARDIS will die. And so it's the Toymaker thinks that they've got him in a catch-22. There's no escape from this. The Kobayashi Maru solution going on here. which is actually kind of what the Doctor does, because he then realizes the loophole that the Toymaker's left, which is if he can just replicate the Toymaker's voice and say advance to
move 1023
or 4, right, or to the last move from inside the TARDIS, they're safe. And that's what he does. Although first time he tries it, does it in his own voice, and then he uses some sort of modulation on the TARDIS to do it in the Toymaker's voice. And the Toymaker lets him do it, which is, I think, interesting. Because as powerful as he is, he probably could have stopped him.
Maybe. I think that would be up to the writers of can the Toymaker stop him, and what kind of power does he have in the TARDIS, and how quick can he use it?
Because he was able to, make the Doctor invisible and intangible in the TARDIS. He probably could have silenced him as well.
Well, he did silence him, but can he do it quickly enough before the Doctor can imitate his voice? Although
he did hear the Doctor say it the first time. That's the thing. So they kind of opened the door to that question. But in that moment, they didn't bother and let it go. I felt like even just from what the Toymaker's reaction that I heard, that he seemed amused that the Doctor found a solution.
Mm-hmm. And they allude at the end of this story to the fact that Toymaker is not destroyed. Even though his realm has collapsed, he'll just build a new one.
Right.
And Dodo makes the point. So, you're going to run into the Toymaker again, and you're not going to be free of him. And the Doctor is like, well, yeah, kind of. And the Toymaker proved to be quite a popular character. He appears in a bunch of spin-off media, I guess comics and books and audio plays and stuff. And they were going to bring him back in the 6th Doctor's time for season 23, but they ended up, the show got put on hiatus for 18 months, and they completely reconceptualized season 23 as Trial of a Time Lord. And so that story didn't make the cut, but they planned on bringing Michael Gough back as the Toymaker. And Big Finish eventually, I think the story was called The Nightmare Fair, but Big Finish ended up doing an audio adaptation of it. So you can hear what that's, at least an approximation of what that story would have been had they made season 23 the way they planned.
Right.
Starring Colin Baker.
Sorry. Yeah. And it took until season, whatever the 60th anniversary, almost 60 years later, before we actually got it.
And it's nice. They refer back to this original encounter where it's like the Doctor won, and then at the beginning of the 60th anniversary special, the Toymaker wins. And so now we got to play 2 out of 3.
Where else have I seen Michael Gough? That's the interesting. I mean, I'm sure he's been in lots of things, but I'm just trying to think of where else I've seen him. He's not elsewhere. I'm looking. He's been in a few episodes, other episodes playing different characters in Doctor Who. He was in the Image of the Fendal, in Legopolis, Time Flight, Mark of the Rani, and Silver Nemesis. He's been in all of those, but anyway, so
Time Flight. Ugh.
I just saw someone discussing that. They were saying that I think he said his father-in-law was a Concorde pilot. He's like, oh, I wonder how he'll enjoy this one. You're going to torture your poor father-in-law.
And I like in the Sycorax Rox's 5th Doctor song, Total Eclipse of the Celery Heart. There is a bit that on an emotional level, the emotional resonance is perfect, where he's singing along. He's also he or others are doing backup vocals as well. And they're singing along, talking about the 5th Doctor's adventures. And, they're singing about how Adric is on I'm blanking on the name of the adventure,
E-Space?
But no, not it's when Adric dies.
Oh, right.
And he's singing, guess the mass extinction was his fault. And then you hear the backup singers say, oh my God, time flight. And it's like, I wish I could revise that lyric a little bit, but I don't know what I'd revise it to, because oh my God captures the emotional resonance perfectly
of having to watch Time Flight.
Of having to watch Time Flight.
Yeah. By the way, I realize now I discovered where I know Michael Gough from. It is from the original 4 Batman movies.
Oh, okay.
The 89 to 1997.
Oh, he's Alfred, right?
Yeah. So,
by the way, speaking of other actors, it's interesting. So, they made the 2 Doctor Who movies in the 1960s based on William Hartnell stories, starring Peter Cushing instead of William Hartnell. And Peter Cushing had his own fan theory based on the Celestial Toymaker. He said, so there's always a question of, well, how do these Peter Cushing movies relate to the main stories? My own headcanon is this is just another version of the Doctor in an alternate timeline. Yep. But there are other ways of integrating him. And here's Peter Cushing's theory. Peter Cushing said in an interview that he believed that his incarnation of the Doctor is canon and is just a future version of the Doctor that the Toymaker kidnapped, wiped his memory, and is forcing him to relive his earlier adventures.
Which is not that far off from the fugitive Doctor who had her memory wiped. Yeah, that's pretty good. Peter Cushing. All right, any final thoughts on the Toymaker, the Celestial Toymaker?
Nope. Although I would say, just on the Peter Cushing thing, they've now canonized, because we have this looser timeline system with the new Russell T Davies era. They've now canonized like the Schalke Doctor and shown his face, Richard Grant's face, among the Doctor's faces. And even though he's in an alternate timeline, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see Peter's Cushing face in a similar situation in the future. That would be fun. It would be. I would root for that. Yeah, I would. More Star Wars actors in Doctor Who. That's what we got. Definitely. So I did mention we have some feedback. So let's get to that. From our 400th episode, where we discussed downtime. Paul wrote on YouTube, "Happy show-niversary, gentlemen. This was a lot of fun. I checked out Downtime before watching it and enjoyed the story and the review. Here's to 400 more." I'm not sure we have 400 more episodes in us, but hey, the show's been around 60 years. Who knows how long we'll be doing this? That's right. Then Doug's Film and TV also writes on YouTube, "Congrats on 400. I'll say Downtime is very interesting, and it was good to see Nicholas Courtney, Elizabeth Sladen, and Deborah Watling in this story. It was great to have the Great Intelligence and the Yeti to come back. I have to point this out, and Jimmy Akin was right. The Brigadier did return in the David Tennant era, but not in Doctor Who, but the Sarah Jane Adventures in the episode Enemy of the Bane, and that was the last time Nicholas Courtney reprised his role as the Brigadier. I will say Downtime looks a bit like the Matt Smith story, The Bells of St. John's, because you have the computers that run amok. Do you think Moffat used Downtime as inspiration for The Bells of St. John's?" I don't think, my own opinion would be, I wouldn't think so. What Moffat tends to do is take something that's a normal part of life and think of, how can I make this scary? So that's what he did with the Weeping Angels, with, angel statues. It's what he did with the Vashta Narada, with how can I make shadows scary? It's, and he's doing the same thing here. How can I make computers scary now that they're an omnipresent part of our lives? So that would be my guess. But, I couldn't say for sure that he didn't have Downtime back in his memory bank somewhere. I mean, I would have thought he would have brought the Great Intelligence in. Computer pun. That was very good. Yeah. Very good. And then let's see, our discussion of Resurrection of the Daleks, that 5th Doctor story, Robert on Facebook writes, "Aliens is still 2 years away at this point, Dom, but this is an insanely violent story." I think I made that reference about how violent it was. "It has a higher body count, not counting Judgment Day itself, than either Terminator movie. It's not a favorite of mine either. I mentally offered Jimmy a hug when he was asked to relay the plot. It's got a bunch of stuff that goes nowhere and seems indicative of Eric Sayward's obsession with guns, mercenaries, and an insanely high body count with no real purpose behind it." Well, thank you. Thanks for the hug. Thanks for I think the Terminator body count, you'd have to discount the Terminator Apocalypse part of it. When Linda Hamilton sees Los Angeles go up. But apart from that, you're probably right. And that's our feedback. So thank you everyone for sending that in. We love your feedback. We'd like to take a moment now to thank someone else we love, our patrons.
who make it possible for us to create The Secrets of Doctor Who, including Vincent D., Paul L., Ryan O., Adika L., and Tom V. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue The Secrets of Doctor Who and all the shows at StarQuest. And you can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. So that's it from us. We'd love to know what you think of the Celestial Toymaker. You can let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com, the Secrets of Doctor Who Facebook page, or send an email to drwho@sqpn.com. Visit the StarQuest Discord community at sqpn.com/discord, or watch us on YouTube, where you can leave a comment at youtube.com/StarQuestMedia. We'll be back next time when we'll be discussing the Ninth Doctor Big Finish story, Run. Until then, Jimmy Akin, thank you for joining me and sharing The Secrets of Doctor Who.
Thanks, Tom.
And once again, I'm Don Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who on StarQuest. And remember, I'm a bad loser, Doctor. I always destroy the Destroyer.